guy who's been having a lot of fun covering Caitlin Clark and maybe less fun covering Iowa football. He is Adam Jacobi from Go Iowa Awesome. The man, the myth, the legend. Brother, how are you?
Patrick, I could not be better. Thank you so much for having me on today. Your choice of theme songs was especially appropriate. You're playing Cyndi Lauper, and Iowa's game last night was Cyndi Lopsided.
Oh,
the Hawkeyes won by 40. Won by 48 points on the road. Ruined senior night for the Gophers. And Minnesota looked like they were shooting about Gopher 100 out there last night.
Okay. By the way, you're going to get cut off if you keep this up. Not by me, because I love it, but my producer. So we have a running joke, Adam, with my producer, because, you and I are both punny people. We love a good pun. We love a good dad joke. And so anytime
one or two.
Yeah, anytime I drop a pun of any kind or a joke or, my favorite is making camo jokes. We were out eating and there were two guys in camo sitting at the bar, and I looked at Rogers and I said, I can't believe nobody's sitting at the bar tonight. That kind of thing. And every time I do it, he looks at his wrist. He points to his non-existent watch on his wrist and says, keep that between 1 and 3 weekdays. Like, we don't do that outside of business hours. So I'm just saying, be careful because, Hambone might accidentally cut off the phone line. I'm just saying.
Well, that's if Hambone's going to do it, it'd be a little stupid to do it.
Okay. All right. Calm it down now. Let's go. All right. Come on. Hey, I got to ask to start with, did Iowa athletics make a deal with Satan that they would have a generational talent in their athletic department? The problem is it's a women's basketball player and a punter.
If that's the sort of deal that Satan makes, I think Iowa's going to go back for seconds, because both of those players are both Caitlin Clark and Tori Taylor, both legendary at their positions, but they're also not anywhere close to the first greats at their positions at Iowa. So in some sense, it's historically appropriate for both of them to be at this level. But that being said, there really is just nobody like Caitlin Clark in the history of women's basketball. That's
honestly that's one of the questions that I keep coming back to is, how do you quantify the list and where Caitlin Clark is on it? Because, she's not a forward or a center, and the likes of Lisa Leslie, they're playing a different game than she is, and she's playing a different game than they are. And how do you equate her with a Sue Bird, who's more of a passer than a shooter, or a Diana Taurasi, who's doing a little bit of everything? That's maybe the most ranking female singers, female vocalists, and women's basketball players are maybe the two hardest things I think there could be right now.
Well, it's difficult because there's so many ways to be great in both, vocalists and, on the court, because both of those allow so much room for creativity, for individual greatness and really to have the personality of that person come out. And so the reason why it's so difficult to quantify or to contextualize somebody like Caitlin Clark is just that there's just never been anybody like her before. And so you're always going to be bumping into, the comparison's good here, but it breaks down there. It really reminds me of watching Kobe Bryant play.
Who it reminds me of, Adam? It reminds me of Steph Curry. Remember when Steph Curry was at Davidson and everyone's like, we cannot believe this dude. He's kind of carrying the team. Now, Caitlin Clark's got good players with her. Let's not act like she's the only one that's worth a damn on that team. But at the same time, no one was talking about Iowa basketball, and then now it's all about Caitlin Clark. No one was talking about the Davidson Wildcats back in the day, and then Steph Curry appears, and it's suddenly a generational talent. And I think that her ascendancy feels exactly like his to me.
Yeah, there's a lot of similarities there. And, I remember when Steph Curry was at Davidson, and I remember what a phenomenon he was. At the same time, he didn't lead Davidson to the Final Four, or the championship game.
No.
He tried his best. But, Caitlin has elevated Iowa to a top 5 team for most of the season. They're ranked number 6 right now. They are probably looking more like a 2 seed than a 1 in March Madness, but a high 2 seed, right? They're, barring disaster, they're not going to be in, say, South Carolina's bracket, right? So they are still, even if they're not going to be a 1 seed, whoever the 1 seed is in their tournament is not going to be happy to see Iowa
no doubt.
in that same region. And so that is sort of a key difference between Curry and Clark to me, is that she has elevated her game to such a level of consistency along with that greatness that every time she goes out, she's doing something like a triple-double or setting this record or that record. Just last night, Patrick, not only did Caitlin Clark set the real and this is coming from Iowa's coach.
Right.
She considers it the real career scoring record of major college players. But she also set the NCAA record for most three-pointers in a season and the Big Ten career record for most three-pointers. She did that in one game.
Yeah.
And we're not even talking about the 15 points she dropped in the first 3.5 minutes of the game.
Well, she did it over a career, but she broke the record in one game. So, if she'd set the record in one game, Adam, that would be insane.
I'm not going to put it past.
If you turn around and she's got 400 threes in one game, are we okay? Well, yeah, I guess I didn't expect that many shots in a game, but hey.
Yeah, you would think that the defense would try something,
do something.
At the same time, you only get 4 timeouts, and Iowa forced Minnesota to call 3 of them in the first 11 minutes of the game.
Yeah.
So
no,
there was a lot of what the heck do you do about
her. And the other thing that I think is remarkable, and we saw, was it Cheryl Swoops, I believe, who had her dumb comments about it. Number one, she's doing it in fewer games. But number two, and you mentioned the triple doubles, right? It's not like Caitlin Clark is taking 40 shots and no one else gets the ball. I actually called the nation's leading scorer back in 2000, 2001, a guy named Ronnie McCollum, who played at Centenary College. And he led the nation in scoring because the offense was set up and the coach would get mad at the other players if they took any kind of a non-wide open shot and didn't get it to Ronnie for a shot. And he averaged like 1 assist a game. He was not passing the ball. He was there to shoot. But Caitlin Clark does it in such an unselfish manner, right? I think I saw the graphic that she accounted for like 35 of the 55 first-half points last night, something crazy like that. Just it's her willingness to get the teammates involved, not just hoist 30 shots, that I find so remarkable about what she's doing.
Yeah, one, it's really setting her up to be a better pro player in particular when she's going to be, going up against WNBA level defenders, every single night, and really no way around that. You really do have to be a solid, productive teammate. But above all that, she enjoys watching her teammates succeed, and she's talked about this plenty of times in her press conferences. It's a genuine love of the team, and that really goes to the culture that Lisa Bluter has built at Iowa, where everybody is respected equally as a teammate, and that's not just a lip service thing. It's something that they hammer in with them over and over and over. And it's really remarkable to see these young women embody that culture and to reinforce it within themselves and in the press too. And honestly, it drives a lot of fans crazy, Patrick, because a lot of them want to think about Caitlin Clark's career in their same lenses of like what's the most glory that she can get out of this, or what's the most money that she can get out of next year. And really it comes down to how much is she going to enjoy the game and what is putting Iowa in the best position to win their games and make that run back to the Final Four, which is what they're keeping their fingers crossed for. Because ultimately, if Caitlin really does take those 40 shots a game, they would probably be 40 of the best shots I was going to see it that day. But at the same time, it's not going to be really fun to be her teammate at that point. And, why would you be out there trying to set screens for 35 minutes if you're going to get, 2 shots while it really, really turns into the Caitlin Clark
Yeah, I
show.
mean, if you run a pick and roll and you roll to the basket and your defender doubles her and she takes a shot against 2 defenders and you're running wide open down the lane and she doesn't give it to you, well, I'm sure as hell not going to go set another really good screen for you.
Right. You would look at the coach and be like, hey, was I supposed to do something different here? And Clark is smart enough, and Bluter and Bluter's coaching staff at Iowa are smart enough to know that, the gravity that Clark pulls from defenders, the attention, which is another sort of Steph Curry type of term. Like, people talked about gravity for the first time with Curry. You see it with Caitlin too. And if you're going to get that much attention from defenders, you better be skilled at getting the ball out of your hands too. And it turns out she's great at that. Just a couple of weeks ago, Clark passed 1,000 career assists in college, became only the 3rd player to do so. And that is not, that's not stat hunting. That's not lip service. That's not I'll take over the game if I have to, but I'll also pass if that is being a consummate teammate. That's getting yourself ready for the WNBA and playing at an elite level in the WNBA.
Yeah.
So she is set up to be a superstar for a long time to come, and it comes with having the right mindset as a teammate first.
Well, speaking of, correct me if I'm wrong, she can come back, right? She has her COVID year.
Yeah, and she has not made that decision.
Right.
And when you see the discussions that people have about it online, a lot of it centers around, WNBA salaries and she's making this NIL money. And what it really comes down to, and again, this drives people crazy because they want to think about it in terms of NIL versus WNBA salaries versus this or that. Patrick, she's a Nike client. Like, she is represented by Excel. She's best friends with Jake from State Farm. Her money's going to be fine no matter what.
Right.
It's going to come down to, where does she want to play the most next season? And there's one school that says she's going to want to spend some more time with her teammates because she's never going to have this opportunity again, right? She's going to have one decision left to play with Lisa Bluter, Jan Jensen, and the rest of the staff, or to go pro. And that is not an easy thing to turn down when you have it in front of you, right? Nobody ever says, well, I wish I'd gone pro earlier when they look back on Hall of Fame careers. In fact, the father of Iowa tight end Luke Lachey, who decided to come back after being injured last year, his dad, Jim Lachey, was an NFL All-Pro, played at Ohio State, and Jim told Luke, look, if I had one more game to play, it wouldn't be in the pros, it would be in college.
Yeah.
So that pull to come back is very real and has nothing to do with NIL, unless you say, well, NIL is money, right? But it doesn't have to do with a specific amount of NIL that has to be covered or not. It comes down to, who does she want to be playing with and next to and against next season?
Well, and
because
let's
she's
be honest.
Already the best scorer. Yeah, go ahead.
Let's be honest. She also doesn't get to look at your beautiful face if she goes to the WNBA.
Well, for the right price, the Fever can have me as a backup point guard.
All right.
Am I skilled at basketball? No. Would I be? I would be hurt quickly.
Be great in the locker room.
Yeah, well, they would probably have to cordon most of it off.
Well, no,
but,
I'm just saying you would be good for like team morale, or actually you might be terrible for team morale, depending on how they enjoy puns. Really,
there's only one way to find out. Call me Indiana Fever.
Yeah. So I'm just curious. put yourself in her shoes, right? What do you think you would do?
She, I can't do that because she wears a men's 9.5 and I wear a men's 12.
No, I mean, you could. It just wouldn't be very comfortable.
Right. It's a disservice to the Kobe Grinches that she was wearing last night. But if it were up to me, having watched Caitlin play, and if there's any Iowa fans listening, this is right now the time to cover your ears. But having watched her play and seeing some of the plays that Caitlin tries to make that end up like a pass that bounces off a teammate's hand, or, they're not quite looking for it, there are these little microseconds of frustration. And Caitlin is very, very talented at turning that into like redoubling her focus and turning it into better play on the court. But you can tell that there's a little bit of frustration that she's not on the court with 9 other WNBA players. And that's really where she belongs, I think. She is as ready for the highest level of competition as anybody I've seen come out of the Iowa locker room, and as ready as anybody that's come out of college in a long time, right? We're talking about Elena Deladon, Diana Taurasi, Maya Moore, like that, Brianna Stewart, who's still in the league. We're talking about that level of readiness for the next league.
Yeah.
If she comes back to Iowa, she's going to have a great time. She's going to obliterate the record books. And I think it would be, I'll be honest with you, a little bit untoward, because she's proven so much about like how much better she is than pretty much anyone they put in front of her. There's really not much left to prove except for winning a national championship if Iowa doesn't do it this year. And she would have to do it on a completely rebuilding roster next season.
Yeah. Talking to Adam Jacobi.
Like senior friends would be off.
Adam Jacobi from Go Iowa. Awesome joining us. All right, let's talk about the Punt Fest next door over at the football stadium. Obviously, nepotism out, old school offensive coordinators back in. Give me an idea of what we're expecting to see from the newly wide open run and shoot up and down the field Houston from the 1980s and 90s offense of Iowa and Tim Lester.
If Kirk Ferentz heard you describe Tim Lester's offense like that, his eye would start twitching involuntarily. I will say this, though, Lester's offense is at least based in 21st century. Like there is going to be an RPO element to Iowa's offense, which is sort of like saying there is going to be a spoiler on this Model T. You hear it and you're like, wait, what? But the big thing that Lester mentioned was it's about putting your quarterback in comfortable positions, being like, all right, his timing on a 3-step drop takes this long, so we're going to give him this option, this read, that read, and he'll do one of 2 or 3 things depending on what the defense does. And it really can be just that simple. It has to look difficult for the defense, but after Iowa's offense under Brian Ferentz, which was alternately described as like caveman 20th century 1990s type of stuff, and yet at the same time somehow so difficult that the quarterbacks needed a year and a half just to learn the playbook. And that's coming from players. That's the way they described it.
Well, look, you can.
It's clearly not set up for success.
Calculus is complicated and tough to understand, so maybe that's the Iowa playbook from last year.
They described it more like learning a brand new foreign language.
Yeah.
Calculus, at the very least, puts people on the moon. Iowa's offense barely puts people in the end zone.
That's true.
So there's simple is better, and some of it also really came down to the fact that, ultimately when you get up in front of the press and say we want to control the ball, we want to make sure that we're running an offense that's set up to succeed, it's pretty clear that wasn't the case, and that was never going to be the case. So whether you're not going to see Iowa quarterbacks throw the ball 50, 60 times next season. Maybe 50, 60 times in a month, but not in a game. But it really doesn't have to be that, and Iowa doesn't have to be a 40-point a game team to win a bunch of games, clearly, because they just won 10 of them scoring well under 20.
Yeah.
So all they have to do is control the ball as much as they say they want to, 3-4 scoring drives a day. And with that defense still loaded, that's going to be enough against 80-90% of the teams they play. So, it's not going to be night and day. It's not going to be the Washington offense all over again 2.0. It's not going to be Texas Tech, but it doesn't have to be. And it will, at the very least, presumably, barring catastrophe, look better than what Iowa fans have been watching for the last few years.
Well, and I do wonder, right, the first time that Lester's like, all right, I want to take a shot here, and Kirk Ferentz goes, nope. Like, I do wonder I would love to be able to hear any of that conversation. And maybe that's something they'll have already discussed and they won't, there won't be any of that in game. But I would love to have the coach's headset on. Number one, when I'm doing games, we're often right next to a coach's box. So we get to hear, if nothing else, all of the screaming curses that come out and the pounding on the desk or the wall or whatever. Like, we get a lot of that when we do games. But I would legitimately love to hear what Kirk Ferentz's contribution is to the offense, right? Like, what does he say, if anything? Because he's got the headset that goes both to offense and defense. He can talk to either side. I'm legitimately, I'd love to know what he talks about to his offensive guys, if at all, during the course of a game.
You and me both, brother. And it would be fascinating. It would be legitimately fascinating because we're talking about a guy who, is often described as a caricature as an offensive mind and has earned that reputation. But he's also a guy who's won a bunch of games over a bunch of years. So he does deserve a little bit of benefit of the doubt, in terms of the game day decision making and strategery, for lack of a better term. But yeah, and he's also a very pragmatic, practically, thinking sort of guy. And so I'd love to know whether that practicality comes through on the headset or if, if it turns into something emotional, it's not the right word, but if he gets caught up in the moment or we need to get those 3 points back or not, it would be fascinating to hear. And it's a little bit of a shame that college football in general doesn't really open the doors like that the way that even the NFL does by comparison, right? Yeah. Like, Patrick, all you have to do is hop on Instagram and I don't know about your algorithm, but mine loves to show me clips of who's that Dolphins coach, the head coach, Mike McDaniel. Mike McDaniel. Yes, yeah. I was about to call him Mike McCarthy, and that ain't true.
No, that would be hey, that would be your A- coach, Mike McCarthy of the Dallas Cowboys.
Oh God, yeah. Well, yeah, I think I remember seeing the Chiefs were 31st out of 32 overall.
Everything was terrible except for Andy Reid, who was the number one coach in the league.
Yeah.
According to the players.
It must be great to have Patrick Holmes. But,
yes.
but regardless, the NFL at the very least likes to mic these guys up, likes to give fans that intimate look into the communications, and you don't really see nearly as much of that from the college side. And my guess is if I brought that up as an idea to Kirk at his next press conference, he would throw the podium at me. So, I know it's not going to happen from him, but you're right, and I agree. It'd be really fascinating to hear those conversations.
Yeah, I would just love to know. That's one thing that I've always found kind of interesting is what exactly is the conversations that go on, especially when your coach is not your play caller, right? When he's the GM, the CEO, the game manager, whatever, and other guys are calling the plays, right? Who was it that it was in the Super Bowl, right? The defensive coordinator for the 49ers, he was going to call a play, and Shanahan called a timeout, and you could see him get mad at his defensive coordinator for calling that play. They switched plays, apparently, and then, by the way, he ultimately gets fired right after the Super Bowl finishes. So I'm curious if and what. Also, not to mention the fact that the guy that's calling the plays was your son. So, Kirk Ferentz gets on there and goes, hey, by the way, remember, I'm your daddy, and we're not running play action pass right here.
I don't think Brian needed the reminder on that front, but that element would certainly be a part of it, and that aspect of who's really in charge there made things really dicey when it came time to decide to let Brian go as well, especially when the AD leadership turned over essentially mid-season, and the new she was still the interim AD at that point, but Beth Getz was in charge of supervising Brian Ferentz because of Iowa's nepotism laws. So it was her call the entire time, even though Kirk Ferentz wanted the oversight and the review and the, to stick to the process, this and that. But ultimately, it was her call, and she said, all right, we're not bringing him back.
Yeah.
And it made for a very tense press conference. None of the parties will cop to that being tense, but our intel said it was as awkward as it looked.
Yeah.
And but at the very least, it felt like sort of ripping the Band-Aid off and letting this thing actually get back to normal. So
I can tell you this, the nepotism laws in Louisiana, Northwestern State has had multiple co-head coaches that were husband and wife. So, do with that what you will. You can't employ your husband or wife or significant other or whatever. So they've had to have co-head coaches multiple different times in different sports at Northwestern. So I totally get the nepotism thing. Hey, we got to run. As always, good to catch up with you, my friend. Enjoy your front row seat to greatness, not only as a guest on the Patrick Netherton Show, but also getting to see number 22 game in and game out.
Salute, brother. Thank you so much for having me on.
Adam Jacobi, go Iowa awesome.